At 62 years old, my husband of 38 years told me he was in love with someone else. Not just anyone. My best friend from church. My name is Helen Morrison, and this is the story of how the worst betrayal of my life became the greatest gift I never knew I needed. I remember the exact moment my world shifted. It was a Tuesday evening in October, and I'd just come home from teaching 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary. I'd been a teacher for 35 years, and that particular day had been exhausting. Parent-teacher conferences, a stack of essays to grade, and one of those staff meetings that could have been an email. I walked through the door of our home in Portland, Oregon, expecting the usual, Tom reading the newspaper in his chair, maybe the smell of dinner warming in the oven. Instead, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, his hands folded in front of him like he was about to deliver bad news. And I suppose he was. We'd built what I thought was a good life together. 38 years of marriage. 2 grown children, Michael and Sarah, both settled in their own lives with their own families. 4 grandchildren who called me Nana and climbed all over Tom every Sunday after church. We had routines. Wednesday night Bible study, Saturday morning farmers market, Sunday service followed by lunch at the same diner we'd been going to for 2 decades. Susan had been part of those routines for the last 15 years. She joined our church when she moved to Portland after her divorce, and we'd become instant friends. She was lonely. I was welcoming, and before long she was at our house for dinners, included in our holiday celebrations, sitting next to me in the church choir. Tom and I had even helped her move into her apartment. Her ex-husband James had stayed back in Seattle, and she'd needed a fresh start. That's what friends do, right? They show up. They help. They become family. I trusted her with everything. My fears about retirement, my worries about Michael's struggling marriage, the way I sometimes felt invisible as I got older, like I was fading into the background of my own life. Susan understood. Or at least, I thought she did. Tom cleared his throat that Tuesday evening, and I knew. Before he even opened his mouth, something in my gut knew. "Helen," he said, "we need to talk." I set my bag down slowly. 38 years of marriage teaches you to read the spaces between words. This wasn't about vacation plans or whether we should finally replace the roof. "Okay," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He wouldn't look at me. This man who'd looked into my eyes on our wedding day and promised forever was studying his own hands like they held the answers to questions I hadn't asked yet. "I don't know how to say this." "Just say it, Tom." I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. My legs had started shaking. I've developed feelings for someone. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. Normal sounds in a moment that was anything but normal. "Susan," I said. It wasn't a question. His head snapped up. How long?" He hesitated. In that hesitation, I saw everything. The Wednesday night Bible studies that sometimes ran late. The Saturday mornings when he'd offer to help Susan with errands while I did the shopping. The way they'd started sitting together during church services, with me on his other side, completely oblivious. "About 8 months, he finally said. 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of coming home to me, sleeping in our bed, kissing me goodbye in the mornings. 8 months of me confiding in Susan about my marriage, about my fears of growing old, about everything, while she was betraying me with my own husband. Are you sleeping with her? Helen, are you sleeping with her? Yes. That single word hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my chest constrict, like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart. "I want a divorce," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, Helen. I never meant for this to happen. But I love her." I stood up. I didn't cry. Not then. I simply stood up, walked to our bedroom, and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed Tom and I had shared for nearly 4 decades, and I tried to understand how I'd gotten here. That night, Tom slept in the guest room. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at Susan's. I'll call the lawyer today. I'm sorry." I called in sick to work for the first time in 10 years. I sat in my quiet house and tried to figure out what to do next. Do you call your children and tell them their father is leaving you for your best friend? Do you call your pastor and admit that the marriage everyone in church thought was solid had been a lie? Do you scream? Do you beg? Do you fight? I did none of those things. Instead, I got dressed, drove to school, and taught my fifth graders about fractions like my world wasn't falling apart. But it was falling apart. Oh, it was. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyer consultations and whispered conversations. Michael was furious. "Dad's having a midlife crisis at 64? He'd said on the phone, his voice tight with anger. Sarah cried, "How could he do this to you, Mom? How could Susan?" The church, our church community that I'd been part of for 20 years, fractured. Some people quietly took Tom and Susan's side. Others were sympathetic but awkward around me, like divorce was contagious. I stopped going to Bible study, stopped volunteering for the bake sales and the mission trips. Sunday mornings became the hardest. I'd sit in the back pew, watching Tom and Susan sit together where I used to sit, and I'd feel like a ghost haunting my own life. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. You learn who you really are when everything else is stripped away. It was a Sunday in December, about 2 months after Tom had moved out, when I ran into James Chen at a coffee shop near the school, Susan's ex-husband. I'd met him once or twice years ago, back when Susan first joined our church. He was a high school math teacher in Seattle, quiet and reserved, and I remembered Susan complaining that he was too boring, too focused on work, never adventurous enough. Looking at him across that coffee shop, I saw someone who understood. "Helen," he said, recognizing me immediately. I heard, "I'm so sorry." We sat down together, two strangers connected by betrayal, and we talked for 3 hours. He told me his story, how Susan had left him after 22 years of marriage because she wanted something more exciting, how she'd moved to Portland for a fresh start, how he'd later found out she'd been having an affair for the last year of their marriage. "I was bitter for a long time," James said, stirring his coffee. "Angry. I threw myself into work and told myself I was better off alone." "How did you stop being angry?" I asked. I needed to know. The anger was eating me alive. "I realized something," he said, looking at me with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "The best revenge isn't revenge at something that's yours." That conversation planted a seed. A tiny seed of an idea that would grow into something I never expected. James and I started meeting for coffee once a week. Just two teachers, both navigating divorce, both trying to figure out what came next. We talked about education, about our frustrations with the public school system, about the students who fell through the cracks because the system was too rigid, too underfunded, too broken. "I've always wanted to do something about it," I admitted one Wednesday afternoon. We'd graduated from coffee shops to actually meeting at his apartment in Seattle when I drove up to visit Michael. Create something better. "But I'm 62, James. Who starts over at 62? "Who says you're starting over?" he said. "Maybe you're starting up." It was James who first suggested it. What if we did it? What if we created an educational consulting firm? Tutoring, test prep, curriculum development for homeschoolers and private schools. We both have the experience. We both have the connections. And we both have nothing to lose. I laughed. Actually laughed. "James, I'm a 5th grade teacher. I don't know anything about running a business. But you know everything about teaching. And I know everything about math and systems. Between us, we could figure out the rest." The idea should have seemed crazy. Two 60-something teachers with no business experience trying to start a company from scratch. But something about it felt right. It felt like taking control of my life again. It felt like building something that Tom and Susan couldn't take from me. We filed for our business license in January. Morrison Chen Educational Consulting. I used the small inheritance I'd received from my mother, money I'd been saving for retirement. James used his savings. We rented a small office space in a strip mall between Portland and Seattle, right off the I-5. We created a website. We networked with everyone we knew. The first 6 months were terrifying. We had exactly 3 clients, a homeschooling mother who needed curriculum help, a student preparing for the SAT, a small private school that hired us to review their math program. We made barely enough to cover rent, but we kept going. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, plan lessons for my 5th graders, teach all day, then drive to the office and work on the consulting business until 9 at night. I was exhausted. I was scared, but I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. James was the same. He'd commute down from Seattle 3 days a week, teach his high school classes, then work with me on building our business. We were quite a pair. 2 divorced teachers in their 60s, determined to prove that it wasn't too late. And slowly, things started to change. One of our early clients, the mother of an SAT student, referred us to her entire homeschooling co-op. Suddenly, we had 15 families, then 30. We hired 2 part-time tutors, both retired teachers who wanted flexible work. We developed a specialized curriculum for gifted students who were bored in traditional schools. We created test prep programs that actually worked. By the end of the first year, we were profitable. Not wildly so, but enough that I could see this wasn't just a pipe dream. This was real. Tom and Susan got married in a small ceremony that spring. Sarah told me about it, crying on the phone, apologizing for even going. "He's still my dad, Mom, but I hate what he did to you." "It's okay, honey," I told her. And surprisingly, it was. I wasn't okay with the betrayal. I don't think I'll ever be okay with that. But I was okay with them being together, because I was finally okay with being apart. The divorce was finalized that summer. Tom got the house. I didn't fight it. I'd moved into a small apartment near the office anyway, a clean, bright space that was entirely mine. No memories, no ghosts, just possibility. James and I fell into an easy partnership. We weren't romantic. People assumed we were, of course. 2 divorced people spending so much time together. But what we had was better than romance. We had respect. We had shared purpose. We had friendship built on mutual understanding. "You know what I love about this?" James said one evening as we were reviewing quarterly numbers. "We just landed a major contract with a chain of private schools. We're not doing this to prove anything to them. We're doing this for us." He was right. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about showing Tom and Susan what they'd lost. It had become about discovering what I'd found. By year 2, we had 12 employees. We'd expanded into online tutoring, corporate training for teachers, and educational software consulting. I retired from Lincoln Elementary to work on the business full-time. It was scary, letting go of the identity I'd had for 35 years. But it was also freeing. We moved into a larger office. We hired a business manager, a marketing director, and a whole team of specialized tutors. We were featured in a local business magazine as second act entrepreneurs. The article talked about how we'd built $1 million business from scratch in our 60s. $1 million. I'd gone from a divorced teacher living in a small apartment to a CEO of a thriving company. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Funny how Tuesdays kept marking the important moments. It was Tom. I almost didn't answer. We'd barely spoken since the divorce was finalized 2 years ago. All communication went through lawyers or occasionally through the kids. "Helen," he said when I picked up, I was hoping we could talk. "What about Tom?" There was a long pause. "I heard about your business. That's amazing. Congratulations." "Thank you." Another pause. "Susan and I, things haven't been going well. We're having some financial troubles. My retirement isn't stretching as far as I thought, and Susan hasn't been able to find steady work. I was wondering." I waited. I knew what was coming. "I was wondering if there might be a position at your company. For me, I know I don't have teaching credentials, but I could do administrative work or—" He trailed off. And in that moment, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not even satisfaction, just peace. "Tom," I said gently, "I don't think that would be appropriate, but I do hope you figure things out." "Right. Of course." I just thought, we were married for so long, and— "We were," I agreed, "and now we're not. I wish you well, Tom. I really do." I hung up and sat in my office, in the company I'd built with James, and I thought about the journey. From that Tuesday evening 2 years ago when my world fell apart to this Tuesday afternoon where I could genuinely wish my ex-husband well, that's not the end of the story. That's not even the most important part. The most important part came a few months later when we opened our second location. I was standing in front of a room full of students, parents, and teachers, giving a speech about the importance of lifelong learning, about how it's never too late to start something new, about how setbacks can become setups for something better. I looked out at the audience and saw Michael and Sarah sitting in the front row with their families. I saw James, my business partner and friend, beaming with pride. I saw our employees, people who believed in our mission. I saw students whose lives we'd changed, whose futures we'd helped shape. And I realized something profound. Tom didn't leave me for Susan. Tom left me for myself. He just didn't know it. Because without that betrayal, I never would have met James. I never would have started this business. I never would have discovered that at 62, I could be brave enough to build something from nothing. I never would have learned that my worth wasn't tied to being someone's wife or someone's friend. My worth was mine alone. I still go to church, though not the same one. I found a new congregation, one where nobody knows my history, where I'm just Helen, not the woman whose husband left her. I reconnected with my faith in a deeper way. I learned that God doesn't waste pain. He uses it. He transforms it. He turns ashes into beauty, if we let him. Do I still have hard days? Of course. There are moments when I see an older couple holding hands and I feel that pang of what I lost. There are moments when I wonder what my life would look like if Tom had kept his vows. But those moments are fewer now. They're quieter. James and I talk about eventually selling the business, maybe in another 5 or 10 years. We've had offers, good offers, life-changing money. But we're not ready yet. We're having too much fun building, creating, making a difference. Sarah asked me once, about 6 months ago, if I would have chosen this path if I'd known what it would cost. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I wouldn't have chosen the pain, I told her. But I would choose who I became because of it. Every single time. That's the truth of it. Tom and Susan didn't destroy me. They freed me. They freed me from a life that was comfortable but small, from a marriage that worked but didn't thrive, from a version of myself that was content to just exist instead of truly live. I heard through the grapevine that they split up last year, that Susan moved back to Seattle, that Tom is living alone in the house that used to be ours. Part of me feels sad for him. Part of me understands that everyone is fighting battles we can't see, but mostly, I don't think about them at all anymore. And that, more than any business success or financial milestone, is the real victory. I'm 64 now. I wake up excited about my work. I have friendships that are real and deep, built on honesty instead of convenience. I have a relationship with my children that's stronger because they saw me survive and thrive. I have purpose. I have peace. I have myself, fully and completely, maybe for the first time in my life. The story people tell is about revenge, about the ex-wife who built $1 million business and showed her cheating husband what he lost. And sure, that's part of it. That's the headline. But the real story, the one that matters, is about a woman who got knocked down and decided to get back up differently, who took the worst thing that ever happened to her and used it as fuel instead of poison, who learned that endings are just beginnings in disguise. This is my story, and I'm not done writing it yet.